we'd like it to not wait like we just did. So how's the real world? Well, the real world is not like that, right? We have Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it seems like it will go wrong, and it seems to pop up all the time. Not everybody is this bad, but like this poor lady here is looking like, oftentimes we feel like nothing is easy. Employees can be getting frustrated. Customers can be not very happy. Especially as we grow into business, it seems like we're putting out fires all the time, right? I mean, that's kind of the day to day, and it seems like a real waste of time and effort. So what is going on? Why does everything have to seem harder than it should be? And you know what? The answer is because it is harder than it should be. Okay, experience has shown that you don't have to live with this. Experience with thousands and thousands of companies that have applied the kind of method and technique I'm going to talk about tonight, and in my own personal experience and with running a business for many years, and I'll go into that a bit too. There's a way to do this so your work is just that much easier. Customers are that much happier if you do it the lean way. So we're going to be talking about this lean way tonight, and I'll go into more detail about that. But basically, it's where everyone in your business works every day to recognize and eliminate waste. Okay. So everyone means, we're talking about all the employees, everybody in the business, not just management. It's everybody. And working every day to eliminate waste basically means just try to get a little bit better every day. That's what we're talking about, get a little bit better every day. So this is not about giant, projects and spending months studying and new computer systems, and we're going to make major changes. Those things are sometimes needed, but this is about the day-to-day. This is about how you do things, and something that kind of becomes part of your culture, your everyday life. So this will apply to you, the individual work that you do as yourself, and I will show you how you can apply this to what everybody in your company does. But you have to start by learning it yourself. Now, if you don't have employees right now, that's fine, because this will help you in whatever you're doing. Once you have employees, you still have to learn it yourself first. So tonight is really about understanding the basic mechanics of this method. It's not a super complicated method, but there are certain things you have to understand about it. And we'll go into it. There's a structure to it, and it really works. I can tell you it really works. So I'll go in mainly tonight about you learning this for yourself. And then towards the end, I'll touch on some of the things you need to do to teach it to your employees, if you do have employees, and to help build the right kind of conditions in which this will work. And I'll talk about that more. So these are the waste. This is what we're talking about in terms of waste. So it's more than just what you throw in the waste can. This idea of waste, which I consider maybe the most genius idea I've seen in business that came out of Toyota. This was developed by Taiichi Ohno at Toyota in Japan. After World War II, Toyota was a tiny car company, and they were trying to compete with the big three automakers. And back then, the whole idea was mass production, huge capital investment, and Toyota just didn't have those kind of resources. So they had to come up with a way to compete with the big guys. And this is what they came up with. And this method and the whole kind of techniques surrounding it, which we call now lean management, really was probably the primary driver, which took them from that tiny car company to where I think their capitalization rate today, they're worth more than those three companies combined. So this stuff really works. I'll go into each of these as we go through tonight. How do you recognize them? What are they? What can you do about it? We'll go into some common solutions. So everything tonight is meant to be very practical, things that you can take away and really start using tomorrow. And I did want to mention too on this slide, just in the same way that Toyota was this tiny company and was able to beat the big guys, this levels the playing field for small businesses. Okay, So you actually have an advantage over the big guys because you have better control over your culture. And I'll talk about that more later. But this really is kind of your superpower as a small business. It worked for me, and I know it can work for you if you come to understand it and apply it. So here's the basic method. Very common sense. You may do this type of thing anyway. So we'll be going through this tonight, where you basically recognize the waste, which is not always easy, speculate about possible causes, brainstorm, try different solutions, and then when you come up with a solution, you standardize it. So not complicated, but there's key parts to it that you need to understand. Again, this is pretty much getting a little better every day. This is how you get a little bit better every day. Experience has shown with companies that have done this, it's not uncommon to get reduce your problems and defects by 50%. It's not uncommon to double your productivity and to actually reduce wait times by 90%. So if, for example, you've had to wait in the past 10 weeks to get in to see your doctor, if they've applied this, you might get in a week. That's what we're talking about. Really dramatic improvements, but done a little bit at a time, a little bit every day. Now, if this is so good, why isn't everybody doing it? Well, there are a couple of reasons. I'll cover one now and then one towards the end here. One reason is this problem with everyday work, because in any kind of business, and pretty much anything anymore these days, there's this urgency to get the work done, right? We just want to get it done quickly and move on, okay? Because there's something else right in front of us. And what happens is we don't really think about how we're doing the work. So to do what we're going to be covering tonight, you have to first understand how to do it, and then be committed to taking that little step back and thinking about, well, how am I doing the work? So what happens is, right now, oftentimes, if a problem occurs, we like to do a workaround, okay? We just get past it. And what happens is when you do a workaround, whatever that problem was, it's most likely coming back. So you're just going to see it again and again and again. Waste elimination, which you're going to learn tonight, is about permanently solving a problem. Think about that, permanently solving it. Once you solve it and you standardize the solution, you shouldn't see it again. Okay, so that's but this is what happens in the real world, as you know. It's just hard to get out of this habit of just moving on to the next thing. Okay, so this is a tool here we're going to go through tonight. This is called a waste elimination canvas, and you see it's got the 4 steps we just looked at. This is the waste elimination method, but it's giving you a tool to kind of work through it. This is like a training technique, a training wheels, if you will. Don't worry that this is, you have to do this every time. As you get good at doing this, either personally or your employees doing this, you don't have to fill all this out. This is to kind of get you thinking through the steps. Sometimes you can go through these steps in 10 minutes in your own head, or it might involve a little bit more of a study, but again, it's something that will really help, I think, as we learn it. You'll notice that this is arranged in a clockwise. It's might be a little confusing, but the idea is we go through this cycle. You recognize waste as a problem. You speculate about causes. You brainstorm, try solutions, and you standardize. But then you keep going, because again, these are incremental, small improvements. And the idea is not to have the big solution. The idea is make a little improvement today, and you have tomorrow to keep looking at, the next waste and so forth. Okay. All right, so let's start with the waste of defects. This is one of the first of the 4 types of waste. So what are defects? Defects are errors, mistakes, or problems with a product or a service. Okay, so basically when something goes wrong, that's a defect. Now, what are the signals of a defect waste? Now, the idea of a signal, it's like a symptom. It's what you can observe. Because what happens is waste is actually not always easy to see. Oftentimes it's hidden, but in plain sight. So for example, in the waste of waiting, we might think you go to a store and you wait in line for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. You think, okay, that's normal, right? No, it's might be normal, but it's still waste, and it's something that needs attention. Okay, so it's important to recognize these signals so you know what waste is, so you can try to do something about it. And not just you, but again, all your employees, because again, you want to engage them all. So this is a way for them to learn to at least recognize the symbols, the signals of the waste, and then you can move forward with trying to eliminate it. So for defects waste, reworking an activity because a problem occurred. Anytime you have to redo something, that's a signal of defect. Something went wrong, right? But even if you don't rework, you still have a waste, a defect, if a customer did not get what they were promised or what they expected, okay? And we'll have an example here about an overcooked steak where, you have potentially both kinds of signals. So examples, steak overcooked at a restaurant. Email sent to the wrong person, right? So now you have to redo it. They have to, if you even learn that there was a problem, right? You have to now send it to the right person. Missing information on an application form. What happens? All right, now you have to go back, whoever filled that out, get them to redo it again, fill in the gaps. So those are just some examples. So we'll go through this. Now, I'll spend more time on this defect just to go through the steps of the canvas so you can see what's involved in every step, and then I'll go more quickly through the other ways. So, but let's take a little time on this first example of a defect. So it's the case of the overcooked steak, and I always have this little detective guy, because there is detective work in some of this. There's observation is key, and kind of thinking through what could happen is key. So here's the observation. Last week, we had 3 or 4 complaints from customers that their steak was overcooked. So this is a restaurant, small, medium-sized restaurant. And, that's a problem. And the particular kind of problem, it's a signal of waste, of defects waste. So if we want to use the canvas and just kind of walk through the steps so you see what it is, we'll start with what is the problem. Okay, rework, that was the signal. Rework is required because we're getting these complaints about overcooked steak from patrons. Now, there's the waste type is defects, and there's a measure. Now, I'll talk about the measure in a little bit when we get into it, the next type of waste. We'll have an example, but here in this case, the way you would measure this defect would be number of overcooked steaks, right? So it's always important to have that. We'll go into that. Now, the next thing you have to do, though, is you have to say, all right, this waste occurred, but you have to put it in context. And basically the context is, what is the process that it happened in, the waste happened in, and who is the customer of that process? This is really important, because as we go through and you'll see all the waste, it's all relating to the process you're doing and who is the customer of the process, because the whole idea is waste is anything that doesn't produce value for that customer. So we have to understand, what is the customer looking for and who is that customer? So in common terms, what we're really saying is, well, what are we doing here? Like with this steak situation, and why are we doing it? It's another way of saying, what is the process and who is the process customer? So now it's important to understand there's 2 different kinds of customers. There's the kind that you would normally think of like a customer that we'll call external customers. And for those, in this case, what is the process? Well, serving a meal, and the customer is the restaurant patron. Or let's say it's a doctor, hospital, delivering medical treatment would be a process. Who's the customer? Patient. In this, I'm presenting a webinar. That's the process. Who are my customers? You who have registered and are attending. Okay. So that's one kind of process and customer that you would normally think of. But there's also internal customers. And this is very important. So for example, If the process you're looking at that there's a signal, there was an issue, is say preparing the weekly payroll in a business, who's the customer of that? Well, it's the employee, right? Isn't that the main person who is benefiting and from that process? And this would be the person who would say, gee, that was a good process, or no, it wasn't a good process. Okay. Now, there can be other customers. You might argue, well, the weekly payroll process also is necessary for the banking, whatever. But there's always a primary customer, and you don't want to overcomplicate that. So, preparing weekly payroll, collecting a receivable might be the controller, okay, because that's the person who's on the hook for collecting that money. If it's not collected, they're the ones that are going to be looked to. So they're going to define, hey, this was a good receivable process or it wasn't. Or performing a pit stop in a race car driver is the internal customer for that pit stop. Okay, so just to be aware of that, just use common sense for it, but you do need to kind of position the signal in the process and the customer. So in this case, the process is preparing and serving a steak dinner. Okay, and the customer is the restaurant patron. Okay. Now, the next step is, now that we've identified the problem, process, the customer, let's speculate about causes. So let's talk about that a little bit. It's important. You want to seek out the root cause. Now, what is the root cause? The root cause is some problem or a factor that when you address it, you will automatically reduce or eliminate the problem. Okay. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a headache. Okay, that's clearly a symptom or a signal of some kind of problem, right? What was the root cause of your headache? Well, first of all, if you just go ahead and take Tylenol, are you addressing the root cause? No, you're really not. That's a workaround. It can stop the headache, but is that headache going to come back at some point in the future? Maybe not, but maybe so. So if you want to look for the root cause, you say, well, why do I have this headache? So root cause is really about asking why, and sometimes you have to ask why multiple times. So let's say you say why. Well, I think it's tension. Okay. So let's address the tension. Well, but now you have to ask, well, why are you tense? Okay. So you might say, well, I'm tense because, my situation at work, I got a really nasty boss. So if you can change that situation, maybe you get a different boss, maybe you change jobs, does your headache go away? If it does, then I think it's reasonable to say, gee, that was the root cause, so we fixed it. But maybe it doesn't go away. So you go, oops, maybe you go to the doctor and they scan your brain and they realize, oops, you do have a small tumor that's got to be removed. Remove the tumor, headaches go away. So the whole point is the root cause is whatever that thing is that you can go in and tweak or change and causing the problem to go away, causing the waste to go away. Now, root causes are not always that obvious, and that's where you need to be a bit of a detective. And in the real world, there's often multiple causes and influences of waste. So, for example, a lot of times if you've had to wait a long time for something, there could be a number of reasons for that. So in the real world, there's often multiple reasons. Here's the good news. All you got to do is find one. Okay, because remember, this is getting a little better every day. So all you have to do is find one thing that looks like it works, try it out. That's what we're going to be showing here, like a trial and error. And if it works, you standardize it and you move on and you look for other. Okay, it's part of your everyday work. So that's the idea of possible causes and doing this root cause look. So in this case, with the steak, we thought, all right, maybe the oven temperature controls are off. Maybe we're setting it to 350 and it's really 400. Maybe their cooking procedures are off. We're not doing it right. Maybe the patrons don't understand. Maybe they're ordering medium steak and they really didn't want that. There's a misunderstanding about what is a proper cooked steak. So those are possible causes. Now, the next thing is once you have that, you say, all right, let's try some things. And So brainstorming is what we're going to look at here, kind of coming up with possible solutions. But it's more than that. It's brainstorming and trying, which is sometimes called tristorming. Okay. And so and I'll explain how this works. So basically, you've got the problem, you got the waste, you've got some possible reasons. So imagine a better way. Imagine a way of dealing with that root cause, whatever it is. Instead of spending hours or days analyzing it, just try it. Try it. Try to make that change if you can. You can't always. I mean, if you're saying, I think there's a better way to do brain surgery, well, you're not going to just go, I'm just going to try it. But there are some things that you can just try if they're, minor changes or whatever. But if you can't try it, you at least what if it. So you're really doing like a thought experiment. Okay. And based on that, either trying it in the real world or trying it in your head or by talking with other people, hey, what do you think would happen if we did this? You look at what happened. Did something seem to improve? Did it not? And from there, you might say, gee, that looks like a good solution. But oftentimes you'll go back and think about, okay, let me tweak that way that I was thinking about. Instead of going this way, I'll go a little bit that way. So this is really like a circular process, like a learning by trying. So you might try a number of things, just kind of testing to see. So it's really trial and error. The thing I want to emphasize here is just do it. Don't spend hours and days studying and thinking. This lean way is you just do it. And you need to do it in a controlled way. And that's where, you and your employees get to know how this works. But that is the step here of looking at different solutions. So in this case, brainstorming and trying, we did check the oven temperature control. We tried it a few ways. It was okay. It seemed like it was all right. We were testing it with a thermometer. The menu descriptions, we talked to customers. No, the menu description, because we say in the menu what the different levels of steak cook are, and it seemed okay. But we did say, what, cooking procedures, there's different cuts of meat. And it may be that we're not varying our cooking procedure properly. So the head chef, to try it, said, okay, I'm going to come up with, let's try this meat thermometer. And here's how I would use it on the various cuts. So we did it for 3 weeks. We tried it, trial and error, and hey, it actually reduced the number of overcooked steaks and other positive consequences. People liked it. The cooks liked it. They had more guidance. It was a good thing overall. So based on that, we said, yeah, that's what we're going to do. So what do you do with that? You standardize. Now, so you want to document it, train whatever individuals are involved. If you've done standard work, and I'll mention what that is, has been adopted, you follow standardizing. But so standard work is another lean technique. I don't have time to cover it tonight, but Lexi will be sending you links to prior SCORE webinars on these different subjects. So she's going to send you a link about standard work if you want to learn more about it, how to go into that. But for now, whatever method you use for actually documenting, maybe it's you have checklists, you have procedure write-ups, you might have post-it notes or whatever. It's good to document it somehow, because if you just say it and everybody kind of understands it, and then what happens is you tend to forget and you regress back. So, somehow document it. But you continue to look for and investigate other types of waste, because in this case, it didn't fix all the problems. We still were having a couple of overcooked steak, but it did reduce it based on counting the number of steaks. So standardize. We did add this thermometer usage to a checklist. In this restaurant, they were using a checklist. Trained all the cooks on how to apply the thermometer to the different cuts, but continued observing and seeing what was going on, because there still were a few steaks being overcooked. So that's kind of gone through all the steps. Like I say, you can kind of see the sorts of things you need to think about. You don't necessarily have to do it in such a formal way. It can be something, a lot simpler, but I'm trying to give you the overall idea for that. Now, for each of these types of waste, I'm going to talk about countermeasures. Now, the idea of a countermeasure is, okay, you find a defect, what do you do about it? Now, these are not the only ways of dealing with these kinds of defects. I'm just giving you common ones, but this is always meant to be kind of a common sense solution, not, really complex things that you can come up with and or any of your employees could come up with as well. So the idea of foolproofing, a couple of options here. One is a checklist. Just a great way to double check. If you have a checklist for something, keep it relatively simple. There's an art to this, and that standard work webinar that you'll get a link on shows you more how to do it. But checklist keeps you from missing something, or just having a brief little description of the key things to do in every step. Oh yeah, to do it the right way. Like in this case, there was one of the steps was use the meat thermometer. So that's a good way to foolproof, try to eliminate the chance of a defect happening. Now, here's another type of thing called a poka yoke, which is the Japanese term. But what it is, this is an example. So you're seeing here a car key and a house key, but because they're on the same ring, that simple device eliminates the problem where you leave your house and drive off in your car and you didn't have your house key. Okay, so that's the type of thing there. If you find that lately, last few years, you're not, when you send an email and you meant to attach something and you didn't attach the file, and you go, now I got to send the file. We're not doing it as much. Why is that? Because poka yokes have been put into the email server software. So if you notice now, as you're getting ready to send an email, the software is looking for patterns in your email that say there's some kind of attachment, whatever. And it'll stop you and it'll say, hey, did you forget the attachment? Okay. So now I'm sure there's a lot fewer emails going out without attachments. It still happens, but now, so these types of countermeasures are meant to tackle defects and reduce or eliminate those. But oftentimes, like, defects is kind of the mother of all waste, because whenever there's a defect, there's almost always some type of waiting, especially if you have to redo something, rework, and there's also extra effort in the rework. So it really can tackle all three of these, but it's primarily going after defects. Okay, so let's go on to the next type of waste, which is waiting. And as I say, I'm going to go through these more quickly because just to kind of give you some feel for it. So with waiting, this is waiting longer than necessary to serve the customer. So here we're explicitly bringing in this idea of the customer. So this is why you have to understand who is the customer and why are they waiting. Okay, so you'll see an example here, and realize too, there's some judgment in here. Waiting longer than necessary. Well, how long is necessary? Well, depends. I mean, sometimes you think maybe it's necessary to wait 10 minutes to get you through the grocery line, but oftentimes it's not. So I've always considered no waiting to be a reasonable goal, and then you try to go for that. Common signals. Okay, customers upset with delays. Why are there these delays? Any customer waiting in any line, even if they're not upset, if they're waiting in line, they're waiting. Employees who wait to proceed because they're waiting for somebody else to finish their job. Okay. So examples of waiting waste: customer waiting to be seated in a restaurant. Maybe a builder is trying to get a permit issued by the city. So if there's any builders out there, I'm sure you've been through that. There's a lot of waiting involved there. A patient might wait for weeks to get a doctor's appointment. So the case we'll look through here, and we'll go through it more quickly, is the case of the upset client. Now, this is a managed service provider who is a consultant that provides IT services to small and medium-sized companies, basically acts like their IT department. So this managed service provider said, we received 2 complaints this week that our service is getting slower. Okay, so that's a signal, right? Complaint from a customer about delays. Things are taking too long. So what's the problem? We're starting to hear complaints from clients. Service is getting slower. What's the waste? Oh, and then I'm sorry, the process, which is important to understand, is, well, where are they waiting? Well, the process is we're trying to respond to an IT support ticket. So that's how it works with MSPs, managed service providers. You're the client, and you're having a problem with your laptop, so you put in a support ticket, and it's saying, "Hey, consultant, I'm having this issue. Help me." So that's the process, and the customer is the client. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. So the waste type is waiting, and the measure. Now, this is important with waiting. You want to know waiting from when to when. So in this case, the important time was the time from when the ticket was actually received. So that was the start of it by the MSP, to when the issue was resolved. Because that's what the client cares about. Like, hey, I had a problem. I sent it to you. How long did it take for you to resolve my issue? And when I'm done with this, I'll show you how you actually track that measure and why that's important. Possible causes: it could have been insufficient training. Maybe we're getting a lot of complex cases lately. Volume might have gone up. Maybe clients were not clear on their expectations. Those were the possible causes. So in brainstorming it, we were reviewing tickets for the past 3 months. We went through and dig through them, and there was no unusual surge. It wasn't like there was a lot of volume overloading us. And we noticed the complaints were mainly about 2 new techs that we had hired. Okay, so now we're kind of seeing the pattern there, right? We did our detective work. So we reviewed some specific cases that showed miscommunication between the tech and the client. They just weren't understanding each other. And why is that? So after asking why a few times, it looked like our new techs were just unsure about some basic procedures. Okay, so to address that, the senior tech started spending an hour a week with each new tech to reinforce training, and their average wait times were reduced by 10% during a 1-month trial. So there's that measure. We did see some results. It seemed to make sense. So we went ahead and standardized that. So our standard work, then, we included that follow-up. It wasn't just initial training. There was an extended coaching period where the techs needed to have that. But the techs, in doing this exercise, they expressed that they still had some concerns about when should they escalate the ticket, because there's basic level techs and there's senior techs. So, so we uncovered some other issues that need to be addressed, and you address them as you have time. Now, let's take a look at this measure, because it is important. It's not, you don't have to do it, but if you can come up with a measure, it really helps. Now, these kinds of measures of waste usually are not in your computer systems, because normal computer systems are tracking major, finance and overall billing and tickets and so forth. But if you need to, it's really often useful just to set up a little tracking, even by hand. Okay, so like in this case, here was a particular day, and here was the tickets. So every tech was tracking their own tickets. When the time started, did they have to escalate? When was it resolved, and how many minutes? Now you might say, well, at least let's do it on a spreadsheet. Well, there's something about doing this by hand where you really learn. You're like in touch with the data. So for example, as you're walking through and you're calculating, well, 32 minutes, 79 minutes, you get here 112 minutes, you're writing 98. And as you're writing it, you're going, gee, why did it jump? And then you think, oops, yeah, I guess I just took lunch, didn't I? So there's that effect of when you do this by hand. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to do this forever. Maybe you just do this for the 1-month trial, and then you don't have to do it anymore. Or maybe you continue doing it. But that's the importance of this waste measure, to see if what you're doing is really helping. More than just, it's good to observe it and have your intuition it's helping, but it's better if you have an actual measure of it. Okay, countermeasure for waiting. All right. Oftentimes, looking at your steps and moving the step. First of all, if you can eliminate a step, That definitely reduces waiting. Sometimes it's just not necessary to do something, it's duplicative. Or sometimes you can move a step, but something that was step 1 and 2 were in sequence, and now you put them in parallel, that's very common. And here's an example. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this example of how in a 4-hour golf round, in a very simple change of parallel work, you can save almost a half hour of time. And this is real. Let me get it started up here. Now you see, here you go. This is the normal way you do it. Here the guy drove up in his cart. Okay, he's getting ready. This guy's getting ready to hit. Now notice this guy's waiting, right? So here's somebody waiting for this to happen. And it takes, for one shot, about 1 minute and 15 seconds. Fill up the divot, get back in the cart, and they head off. Okay, that's the 4-hour option. Look at this. Simple change. Drop player off. Take the sand with you. Driver goes to the air ball. Saves 30 seconds a shot. This basically, this simple change would save pretty much a half hour on the 4-hour. Okay. I mean, it's simple, but this idea of parallel work is very powerful when you're trying to, reduce waiting time. And realize the solution to reducing waiting time is not to rush. Not to say, okay, you guys have to go faster. I mean, yes, you want to have a reasonable amount of time to do something and not dawdle around, but the idea is to do things smarter, and parallel work is one of the examples of that. When you rush and you go beyond your real ability to naturally accomplish something, I'm sure you make mistakes, right? You get tired. People are humans. Okay, so that was defects, waiting. Third type of waste is effort. Exerting more effort than is necessary to serve the customer. Now, what is effort? Effort could be physical effort. It could be mental effort. So here's some of the signals that you look for. People walking around a lot, especially if they're going back and forth. So that's a signal. You can kind of walk into an office, and if you see this, or in a facility, that's a signal that there's a waste of effort. Just seems like too much effort is required. Okay, again, there's a certain amount of judgment here, but I think we all have a sense of that, right? You just have a sense of like, this just seems like it takes it's too much effort. There's got to be an easier way. If the work activities are actually resulting in fatigue, you're feeling very tired, your people are, or you're getting injured, carpal tunnel, things like that. Those are all signals that there's a waste of effort. Examples: excessive approval steps needed to issue a building permit, which is maybe why they were having that waiting time. Multiple screens needed to answer a customer's question. Okay. I think companies are getting better at that, but it seems like in the past anyway, you call up somebody, a telecom company, and you'd ask them a question, and you hear them clicking away. How many times do they have to click to answer your question? Or a delivery driver misses a customer and has to re-deliver. So that's just a waste of effort. Now, so here's an example, and this is the case of the moving blanket idea, and this came from City Furniture, and I do have one of the links where Lexi will send you is a whole webinar on how City Furniture has done lean, and as I say, they've done an incredible job. So in this case, what happens is when City Furniture takes back some furniture with a little nick on it or whatever, they'll fix it, make it like new, but then what they were doing is they were repackaging it in a cardboard container in order to deliver it. And one of their workers just looked at it one day and said, hey, why don't we just use moving blankets instead of cardboard boxes for this touched up furniture? And everybody went, huh. So this is a case, I call it like a eureka moment, okay, where there is a signal there, there's waste, but you actually imagine the solution before you imagined the waste. So in this case, the problem is like an eureka. Why don't we just use moving blankets? And again, you have to put it in context. So it was when you're repacking furniture for home delivery, again, touched up furniture. Who's the customer? The retail customer. So you're always going to want to know who that customer is, because they're the ones that are going to determine, is this getting better or not? What's a good process for them? So in this case, there's two kinds of waste type. The effort of having to pack and unpack, put it in the box, tape it up, and when you get to the customer's location, you have to unpack it. With moving blankets, it's a lot simpler. And then plus the materials. You're reusing the moving blankets, but you had all these cardboard boxes and supplies. You can't reuse those. So you might say, okay, we're done. Well, here's the thing. You want to check it out anyway. And this is a real situation. But the possible causes, it's always been done that way and no one ever thought about it. Okay, that's a eureka moment. But here's the important thing. How would this work? Would the blankets provide enough protection? Because these have to go out on the city furniture trucks. Would it hurt the customers? Would the customers care? Would they be like, why are you doing it in a moving blanket? So they did a 3-week trial with the moving blankets, and they included the warehouse workers, delivery drivers, customers. They realized they did need corner protectors. So they just added those little things, but that's a lot cheaper and easier to put on than the whole box, right? So they put the corner protectors on to avoid shipping damage. Labor and materials were reduced. And so that became standard. And the worker who came up with the idea was recognized and rewarded. I think they got like $1,000 bonus. And that's how I'm going to give you a brief video from Andrew Koenig, who's the CEO of Citi and who's the one that really brought Lean in there, talking about how they handle that. But that's part of Lean also, recognition and reward. So again, if there's effort, at least in terms of walking around effort, typical countermeasure can be changing the physical layout. So what you're seeing here, this is a study done by McKinsey and Company, where they looked at a sandwich shop. And at the top here, this is the before condition. So in order to make a chicken sandwich, a hot chicken sandwich, the server had to go to 13 different locations. They start here, they went to the prep, they went to the bread, they went to the toaster, So you can see, we call this a spaghetti chart, where you're seeing the actual movements. By rearranging the physical layout, they created a cockpit station and so forth, a toaster area here. And I realize this is more than just a simple change, but this is an example of the kinds of things even if it just your change in physical layout might mean, hey, I realize people are walking back to the copier so much. Let's move the copier over more in the middle of the office, something simple like that. But anyway, in this case, by changing the physical layout, they went from 13 movements to 5. So there's your effort. Definitely, you can visually see the reduction in effort. And time, look how they measured it. Reduced preparation time, breakfast sandwich by 51 seconds, lunch sandwich by over a minute. And you might think, yeah, that's not much, but boy, when you multiply this by how many sandwiches in some of these restaurant chains, this is a big improvement. Okay. All right, last one. Now, materials, honestly, if you're in a service business, this isn't that important. Everybody does have some materials, but this is important if you're in retail, wholesale, restaurants, and of course, manufacturing. Anywhere where materials are an important part of your expense base. So here, material waste is if you acquire, hold, or use more material than needed to serve the customer. And some of the signals might be overcrowded storage areas, materials being discarded for whatever reason, dust on storage boxes. So examples would be where a restaurant, sometimes they will pre-make salads at the beginning of the day, and they make more than they needed for the day, so they end up having to throw them out. A clothing store holds on to out-of-fashion dresses in their stock. You're holding more than you need to. A law firm orders too many office supplies. Okay. Now, the one method I want to show you here for countermeasures there is called 5S organizing. There is a whole webinar on that as well. Lexi will send you the link to it. But this is just a super technique. You can see it has to do with taking something that looks like this and organizing into something that looks like this. It involves a lot of visual control, markings, labels, everything organized. It not only saves on materials, but also effort, weighting, and defects. So very, very, very useful technique from Lean. Okay. So that's the basics of waste elimination, some of the kinds of solutions you can find that can be useful. But how do you extend that to the rest of your employees? Okay. As I said, for now, you need to learn it and apply it in the things that you do. But once you get into what your employees are doing, business processes and so forth, you need to do some additional things. Now, Trend Distributors was the company that my wife and I had bought or started down here. We are. This was a wholesale of cabinet and furniture hardware. And over a period of about 10 years, this is what we were able to do. We were able to grow very consistently. These are our sales. We ended up over 10 million, 65 employees, 3 locations, self-funded growth. Our service levels were top in the industry. Normally, the fill rate, which is the way you measure service in wholesale, was 92%. We were at 98, which is very hard to do. Our profitability towards the end was 5 times that of the industry average. How did we do it? We tried to get a little better every day. And we developed trust and a safe space for our employees to be able to talk about issues and for them to all join in getting a little better every day. So let me talk about how you do that, how you create this safe space. Now I'm going to turn it over to Andrew here. This is Andrew Koenig, CEO of City Furniture. Andrew and I pretty much grew up in the business together of using lean management. 15 years now, we've known each other. I've taken hundreds and hundreds of students to City Furniture to see how he does it, because it's just incredible. And he's going to talk about the idea that problems are good. This is the idea of creating that safe space. And you might say, really? They are? But I'm going to let you listen to Andrew, and then we'll talk about why he's saying what he's saying.
Hey everybody, Andrew Koenig here, president of City. One of the next elements of our operating system is problem solving. Well, this one's big to me. So at City, no problem is a problem. Most organizations don't really live this philosophy. We're trying to pull all of the problems out underneath the rug in every single department to create this culture of problems are good, because we believe if they're visible, they're half solved. We're halfway to getting better. Now, City works really hard to develop everybody in our company to be a problem solver. We really work hard in our cultures to create an army of problem solvers. So this is might be a simple conversation, but hard to practice and really hard to do within an organization where no one is afraid to bring up problems, where everyone has the autonomy to give ideas and solve those problems. Then you'll be hard to compete against. So hopefully you learned something today, and appreciate it. Thanks.
So why is that hard? I mean, that's the other barrier to companies doing waste elimination the lean way, where you get everybody involved. Because if you don't feel comfortable talking about problems, first of all, you don't want to embarrass your buddy. You don't want to get called on the carpet. If a company is involved, their way of doing business is kind of a lot of the blame game. This is not going to work in the company. You might do it individually, and you, as say an owner or a manager, can go and say, okay, here's a better way of doing it. Let's reduce waste this way. If you don't have everybody involved in that, and they're actually part of coming up with those identifying problems and solutions, you'll get some improvement, but it won't be nearly as good as if you get everybody involved. And the chance that it'll regress back to where it was is quite high. Experience has shown that, that as long as you're on top of them and micromanaging everybody, yeah, they'll keep doing it. But as soon as you look away, things go back. So one of the famous sayings that is so important when you start extending this to your employees is blame the process, not the person. Okay, very important. Blame the process, not the person. Now, What if it is the person? I mean, sometimes it is, but you always first look at the process, and you never blame and shame somebody in public. If you have to, you bring them in the back. There's times when, people have to be fired. I've fired many people from my company, but it's usually for their character, and they're not willing to respect each other, which is what you need to do to build this kind of trust. Okay, so in terms of trying to teach your employees, I'm just going to show you this idea of a BOLO chart, be on the lookout chart. What you're seeing here, these are the different waste types. These are the common waste signals that you've already seen. We went through each of these. But what you can do is you can take this chart and you can create it a custom chart, see? So this is, for example, company X. So it's the same common waste type descriptions, but you put in whatever is common to your company or your business or your organization. So like in this case, data entry was a big issue, lost records, certain kinds of waiting for the copier, and so forth. Retrieving, storing data files is an issue, okay? So again, just a tool you can use as once you've learned how to do this in your own work, to start, as you have employees, if you do have them, or as you hire them, to train them. This is a great tool for doing that. The other thing I'm going to show you, this is another lean technique. We don't have time to go into a lot of detail here, but the reason I bring this up is the gemba walk is the most important lean technique for building that safe space we've been talking about, building the safe space in which employees will be willing to talk about problems openly and without fear of retribution or embarrassment. All of this is in your slide, so I'll go through it quickly. You'll get a copy of these after. And there is a webinar primarily on the gemba walk. Lexi will send out that link if you want to get more detail on it. But the basic idea is it's a technique in which the manager visits a worker at their place of work. That's what the gemba is. And the idea is to observe the work in action, not just talking about it in an office, but seeing it in action and coaching the worker. Now, this has a lot of benefits. One of the important things for the waste elimination, other than observing, which, hopefully you've seen, observing is an important part of seeing the signals of waste. It's a powerful way to build trust, and I'll show you why. So a famous statement by Fujio Cho, who was the Toyota chairman: when you do your gemba walks, this is what you're trying to do. Go see, ask why, show respect, okay? In a nutshell, that's what you're trying to do. So it's not to go and look over their shoulder and make the employee feel like you're spying on them, okay? Go see. Again, going to the field is much better than just looking at a report. You will learn so much more, I guarantee it. I did this all the time in my business, not just inside the warehouse facilities, but also out with the customers. We were selling to kitchen cabinet shops, furniture makers, and it was invaluable to go and see what's actually happening out there. And it's not always easy. Being able to observe and see waste is a skill. You have to develop it. So you go see. You ask why. You don't go and tell. Don't blurt out, hey, you're doing that wrong. No. Listen to what's going on. See what are the workers' ideas. They often have good ones. We often as managers think we know everything. We really don't. Listening is not easy. You have to learn it. You're out there to learn about the worker and about their problems and their preferences, about the work itself, kind of develop the mental picture of how things work in the field. Again, this is why it can be a barrier to building the safe space, because a lot of managers traditional management doesn't always look at management this way. Lastly, show respect. How do you show respect? You give feedback, but not in a blame mode, in a teach mode, okay? And here you can't be overly concerned about the need to know. Sometimes you have to, the more you share, the better, to a point. And then follow up. If there was an issue, an idea offered by the worker, or a problem, follow up in some way. Don't just drop it. I mean, if they're coming up with suggestions and you're not following up, they're not going to keep coming up with suggestions. Now, if it's a bad idea, if it's weak or flawed, treat it as a teachable moment, but don't let it go. Why does this build trust? Because respect is the first step to building trust. It leads to trust. Okay. Again, that's a whole nother topic, which is in some of my other webinars, but I'm sure you have an intuitive sense of that this is how you build that safe space. So what happens when you do this? When you do it the lean way, where you get everybody involved, you don't just get those incredible reductions in defects, higher productivity, reduced wait time. It becomes a less stressful and more satisfying workplace. This really does. It really works. Why? Workers have more sense of control. The worst thing you can be is feel helpless, right? So they can bring up issues. They can offer solutions. And if their idea is implemented, like the guy at City Furniture that came up with that moving blanket idea, he was on cloud nine. I mean, he owned that idea. Eliminating the annoying pebbles in your shoe. These are the little annoying things. If you can, as you start eliminating, it just gets nicer and nicer to work in a place. Satisfaction that we're getting things done. Shared challenge, a shared purpose. So even some of this notion of what is waste and training, you kind of have this shared vocabulary. Hey, did you see, I saw this defect. That looks like waiting. Okay. And it's opportunity for personal development, not only for management, workers, everybody to learn how to do this. Is really useful stuff. So not only does it do all this, but it also builds trust. Now, trust is something I'm very passionate about. Been tons of studies that high trust companies are just way more productive, more energy, more satisfaction than low trust companies. Covey has observed that if you increase the trust level in an organization, you can increase performance by as much as 7 times. So I won't go into a whole lot of detail there, but the safe space and trust you're creating for waste elimination, that trust is going to pay off to you in so many other ways. Okay. So if there's nothing else you take away from tonight, what I'd like you to remember is try to get a little better every day and respect each other. That's it. What you've learned hopefully is a way of doing that and give you some of the steps. And as I say, these are steps you go through and you want this to become organic for you eventually. But this stuff works and it can change your life. It's really done great things for me and the company that my wife and I built, and it turned into a very successful situation. So that's it. Here's my email. And I'm sure Lexi will send that out also. I do have one more webinar coming up March 25th called X-Ray Your Business and Deliver 5-Star Service. This is taking a lot deeper dive into that standard work topic. And definitely if you already have employees and service processes, this will give you a technique for really understanding and coming up with new insights about your business and your customers that I guarantee you don't have right now. So with that, I'll open it up to questions and appreciate you listening.